Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stepped off the transport bus at Naval Base Coronado on a Tuesday morning that felt hotter than it should have been for March. The California sun beat down on the asphalt as she adjusted the duffel bag on her shoulder and took in her surroundings. At 42 years old, she'd seen plenty of military bases in her 20-year career, but this one felt different. This was SEAL country, and she was about to become the first woman assigned to their administrative command section. Sarah wasn't a SEAL herself. Her expertise was in military intelligence and logistics coordination, but her record was spotless, her mind was sharp, and she'd earned every promotion through hard work and dedication. She'd served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and half a dozen classified locations she couldn't talk about. The scars on her left arm, hidden beneath her uniform sleeve, told stories she rarely shared. As she walked toward the main building, three young SEALs jogged past her, their boots hitting the pavement in perfect rhythm. They didn't look her way. Sarah was used to that. In her experience, special operations guys came in two types: the professionals who judged you by your work, and the others who decided your worth before you even opened your mouth. She found the administrative office and reported to the desk sergeant, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and 3 rows of ribbons on his chest. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, reporting for duty," she said crisply. The sergeant smiled and shook her hand. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. Commander Hendricks is expecting you. Second door on the right." Commander Robert Hendricks was a former SEAL who now ran the base's operational support division. He stood when Sarah entered, and his handshake was firm and respectful. "Good to have you here, Chen," he said. "Your reputation precedes you. I've heard excellent things about your work in Kabul." "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to the assignment." They discussed her duties for the next hour. Sarah would be coordinating logistics for SEAL training operations, managing supply chains, and interfacing with multiple government agencies. It was complex work that required someone who understood both military operations and bureaucratic systems. When the meeting ended, Hendricks assigned a junior officer to show her around the base. Ensign Marcus Webb was 24, fresh-faced, and eager to please. As they walked, he pointed out the various buildings, training facilities, and the legendary obstacle course where SEAL candidates proved their worth. "The team guys mostly keep to themselves," Webb explained as they passed the Special Operations building. "They're pretty tight-knit. Some of them can be, well, old school in their attitudes." Sarah smiled slightly. "I've dealt with old school before, Ensign. I'll manage." What she didn't say was that she'd spent her entire career managing expectations, managing disrespect, managing men who thought a woman's place was anywhere but in uniform. She'd learned to let her work speak for itself and to never, ever let them see her rattled. That afternoon, Sarah was in the logistics warehouse, reviewing inventory records when she heard voices approaching. 4 men in training gear rounded the corner, talking and laughing. When they saw her, the conversation stopped. The tallest one, a muscular man with a close-cropped beard, looked her up and down with barely concealed amusement. "Well, well," he said, "what do we have here? You lost, miss." Sarah straightened and met his gaze steadily. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, I'm the new logistics coordinator, and you are." The man's eyebrows rose. "Lieutenant Commander, seriously." He glanced at his buddies, grinning. "What are you in charge of ordering pens and paper clips?" His friends chuckled. Sarah felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, but her voice remained calm and level. "Among other things, I'll be coordinating the supply chains for your training operations. Which means if you want ammunition, equipment, or those protein bars you guys go through by the case, you'll be working with me." The SEAL crossed his arms. "No offense, ma'am," he said, and the way he said ma'am made it clear he meant plenty of offense, but this is a special operations base. We're used to working with people who understand our world. Have you ever even been in combat?" Sarah could have told him about the firefight outside Kandahar, where she'd held her position for 6 hours while coordinating an extraction. She could have mentioned the Bronze Star in her service record, or the classified operation in Syria where she'd made decisions that saved lives. Instead, she simply said, "I've been in the Navy for 20 years. I've served where I was needed." The SEAL snorted. 20 years of desk work, I bet. Look, no disrespect, but maybe you should let someone with actual experience handle the important stuff. Before Sarah could respond, the man turned and walked away, his friends following. One of them looked back at her with something like sympathy, but he didn't say anything. Sarah stood alone in the warehouse, surrounded by boxes and equipment. She took a deep breath, centering herself the way she'd learned long ago. This was just the beginning. She'd prove herself the same way she always had, through excellence, patience, and unwavering professionalism. What she didn't know was that her real test was still coming, and it would reveal truths that would shake the entire base to its core. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work. Sarah arrived early each morning and stayed late into the evening, familiarizing herself with every detail of the base's logistics operations. She discovered inefficiencies that had gone unnoticed for years, redundant ordering systems, supply chains that could be streamlined, and equipment that was being stored improperly. She fixed them quietly without fanfare. Commander Hendricks noticed. "You've done more in 2 weeks than the last coordinator did in 6 months," he told her one afternoon. "Good work, Chen." But not everyone was impressed. The SEAL who'd confronted her in the warehouse was Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison, and he seemed determined to make her life difficult. He questioned her supply requests, showed up late to coordination meetings, and made snide comments whenever she was within earshot. "Must be nice having a cushy office job," he remarked one day as Sarah walked past the training yard, "while some of us are out here doing the real work." Sarah didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that engaging with bullies only encouraged them. Morrison's teammate, a quieter man named Petty Officer First Class David Torres, seemed uncomfortable with Morrison's behavior. Sarah caught him giving Morrison warning looks more than once, but Torres never spoke up, and Sarah didn't expect him to. Loyalty among team guys ran deep. The real trouble started on a Wednesday morning. A major training exercise was scheduled for the following week, and Sarah had been coordinating equipment delivery for months. Everything was precisely timed: ammunition shipments, communications gear, medical supplies, and specialized equipment flown in from 3 different bases. Morrison stormed into her office without knocking. "We've got a problem," he announced. "The exercise is being moved up 3 days. We need everything by Saturday instead of Tuesday." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but her voice remained steady. "That's a 48-hour window, moving up logistics for an operation this size." "Can you do it or not?" Morrison interrupted. "Because if you can't handle it, maybe we need someone who can." Sarah looked at him carefully. This was a test, and they both knew it. If she failed, Morrison would use it as evidence that she didn't belong here. If she succeeded, he'd probably find some other way to undermine her. "I'll make it happen," she said quietly. Morrison smirked. "We'll see." For the next 3 days, Sarah barely slept. She called in favors from contacts across the military supply network. She rerouted shipments, expedited orders, and personally drove to 2 different facilities to pick up critical equipment. She worked through meals and through the night, coordinating with suppliers in different time zones, filling out emergency request forms, and tracking every piece of gear. Ensign Webb tried to help, but he didn't have the experience or the connections. Sarah worked mostly alone, fueled by coffee and determination. On Saturday morning at 600 hours, every piece of equipment was in place. Sarah personally inspected each shipment, checking serial numbers against her lists. Everything was accounted for, organized, and ready. Morrison arrived at 800 with his team. He walked through the supply staging area with a checklist, clearly expecting to find problems. Sarah watched from a distance as he checked item after item. His expression grew darker with each checkmark. Finally, he walked over to her. "It's all here," he said flatly. "Yes," Sarah replied. "Everything you requested exactly as specified. Must have called in a lot of favors. I did what was necessary to complete the mission." Morrison studied her for a long moment. Sarah thought she saw something shift in his expression, not quite respect, but perhaps a grudging acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Torres approached her after Morrison left. "That was impressive, ma'am," he said quietly. "I don't know how you pulled it off." "Thank you, petty officer." "For what it's worth," Torres added, his voice lower. "Not all of us agree with how Chief Morrison's been treating you. Some of us remember what professionalism looks like." It was the first real kindness anyone on the SEAL teams had shown her. Sarah felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. "I appreciate that." The training exercise went perfectly. Sarah monitored communications from the logistics center, ready to solve any supply issues that arose. None did. Everything she'd prepared worked exactly as planned. Commander Hendricks called her into his office the following Monday. "I heard about the last-minute changes Morrison requested," he said. "I also heard you delivered everything on time without a single complaint. That's exceptional work, Chen." "Just doing my job, sir." "It's more than that." Hendricks leaned back in his chair. "I'm recommending you for a commendation, and I'm assigning you to coordinate the annual Special Operations Symposium next month. It's high-profile work. The top brass will be watching." Sarah nodded, accepting the assignment, but as she left Hendricks's office, she felt uneasy. Morrison had been quiet since the exercise, but quiet didn't mean defeated. Men like him didn't give up easily. She was right to worry. That evening, as Sarah worked late in her office, she overheard voices in the hallway. Morrison was talking to someone she didn't recognize. "I'm telling you, something's not right," Morrison was saying. "Nobody pulls off what she did without cutting corners somewhere. I'm going to find out what she's hiding." Sarah's hand stilled on her keyboard. She sat in the darkness of her office, listening. "Let it go, man," the other voice said. "She did good work. Why are you so obsessed with taking her down?" "Because this is our house," Morrison replied, his voice hard, "and she doesn't belong in it." The voices faded as the men walked away. Sarah sat alone in the dim light, staring at her reflection in the dark computer screen. She'd faced challenges before, but something about Morrison's tone chilled her. This wasn't just about professional rivalry. This was personal. What Sarah didn't know was that Morrison had already started digging into her past, and what he was about to uncover would change everything, though not in the way he expected. Sarah threw herself into preparing for the Special Operations Symposium. It was a massive undertaking, coordinating housing and transportation for officers from every branch of the military, arranging security clearances, and managing logistics for classified briefings and demonstrations. The event would bring admirals, generals, and Defense Department officials to Coronado for 3 days. It was also the kind of high-visibility assignment that could make or break a career. Morrison had gone quiet, which made Sarah more nervous than his open hostility had. She knew he was planning something. She just didn't know what. The answer came on a Thursday afternoon. Sarah was in a planning meeting with Hendricks and 2 other senior officers when Morrison appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, sir," Morrison said to Hendricks, "but there's something you need to see. It concerns Lieutenant Commander Chen." Hendricks frowned. "Can it wait?" "I don't think it should, sir." The commander's expression tightened. "Fine, gentlemen, let's take a 15-minute break." He looked at Sarah. "Chen, stay here, please." The other officers filed out, leaving Sarah alone with Hendricks and Morrison. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her face neutral. Morrison placed a folder on the conference table. "I've been reviewing the supply requisitions from the training exercise," he said. "The one where Lieutenant Commander Chen supposedly pulled off a miracle by moving everything up 3 days." "It wasn't supposedly," Hendricks said sharply. "She delivered everything on time. I verified it myself." "Yes, sir, but I wanted to understand how she did it." Morrison opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "So I checked the original shipping dates on some of the equipment, and I found something interesting." Sarah's mouth went dry. She suddenly understood what Morrison had found. "Several of these shipments," Morrison continued, "were already scheduled to arrive early. The original delivery dates in the supply system showed Tuesday, but the actual shipping manifests showed Saturday, the exact day I told her we needed them." Hendricks looked at the documents, then at Sarah. "Is this true?" Sarah took a slow breath. "Some of the shipments, yes. When I first took this position, I reviewed all pending deliveries for the exercise. I noticed that several suppliers typically deliver early to avoid penalties for late delivery. I adjusted the expected arrival dates in our system to reflect the actual likely delivery dates, not the contractual dates." "So when I asked you to move everything up," Morrison said, his voice triumphant, "you already knew some of it was coming early. You didn't perform a miracle. You just let everyone think you did." "That's not what happened," Sarah said firmly. She looked directly at Hendricks. "Sir, when Chief Morrison came to my office, he presented moving up the exercise as an emergency that would test whether I could handle crisis logistics. I didn't volunteer information about the supply schedule because part of effective logistics is understanding your supply chain well enough to know what's possible. I never claimed to perform a miracle. I simply delivered what was requested when it was requested." "By lying about how hard it was," Morrison interjected. "I didn't lie about anything. I worked 72 hours straight to coordinate that delivery. Yes, some items were already scheduled to arrive early. Items that I had previously identified would arrive early through my own diligence. But I still had to reroute shipments, expedite orders, and personally retrieve equipment to make the deadline. Every hour I worked was real. Every contact I called was necessary." Hendricks was silent, studying the documents. Finally, he looked up at Morrison. "Chief, did Lieutenant Commander Chen deliver everything you requested on time?" "Yes, sir, but—" "Did everything meet specifications?" "Yes, sir." "Did the exercise go smoothly because of her preparations?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "Yes, sir." "Then I'm not sure what the complaint is here. It sounds to me like Lieutenant Commander Chen did exactly what a good logistics officer should do. She understood her supply chain, anticipated issues, and delivered results." Hendricks closed the folder and handed it back to Morrison. "Is there anything else?" Morrison's face was red. "Sir, with respect, she made it seem like she'd done something extraordinary when really—" "She did do something extraordinary," Hendricks interrupted. "She fixed a broken system that her predecessor ignored for years. She identified inefficiencies and corrected them. That's not deception, Chief. That's excellence." He paused. "Now, unless you have evidence of actual wrongdoing, not just hurt pride, I suggest you return to your duties." Morrison stood rigid for a moment, then picked up his folder. "Yes, sir." He left without looking at Sarah. When they were alone, Hendricks sighed. "I'm sorry about that, Chen. Morrison is a good operator.